Good evening. Welcome to the Problem of Being Awake. My name's Ben, and this is the Armchair Monologues, episode 8. And the subject is how the world became divided. So we're going to unpack that in a bit of a longer form discussion, which is a new series I'm doing, going very well. People are enjoying it. It's a bit more in depth. It allows me to use my psychological background a bit better, and also talk through points in more detail, because some things can't be covered in short periods of time, and unfortunately a lot of people have short attention spans, but not everybody, and this is for people who don't. So the world didn't become divided by accident. This is not a few rogue professors teaching bad things to children. The first thing to understand how the world became divided is to grasp this horrible fact. The top 5 donors to the whole of Western civilization's higher learning education systems. And when I say that, I don't mean every education facility. I mean every country. Their top facilities were invested in by this Qatar, UAE, which is Qatar is part of the UAE, but the amount of billions more they've invested puts them way up at the top. And you'll notice now, since Donald Trump's been elected, Qatar kicking out the terrorist leaders they've been harbouring for years. So Qatar, the UAE, China, you would have expected it to be first, but it's third. Saudi Arabia, now potentially allies, potentially not. They've got about 500 million crown princes to spare. They can go off on a tangent. They often do. And then they say, oh, no, he's retired. He's not in the public eye anymore. But I think they've got like 198 to spare in real time. And then it's Iran, number 5. Hopefully, if you're lucky, it's your own government at number 6. But that's not true of all countries. So our enemies have been funding our universities. Why? Well, if you look at the overall idea of a plan, why? If you can't take a country outright, destabilise its youth, brainwash its youth to think like you do. Simple, isn't it? It's almost genius, and it dates back to the first payment to the World Health Organization by Qatar for $7.2 billion in 2002. So it's a long process, and faculty and university professors are kind of 90% on the left wing, with a good chunk of that being on the far left wing. There's very little conservative voices, and people are getting degrees in all sorts of rubbish things. I mean, like gender studies. Honestly, that's a thing that the world will look back on and think, how weird is that they did that for a little while. But it won't be a thing that the world will continue with. And I think you'll find that Donald Trump's election will put a stop to that. It will make it illegal to do child butchery on prepubescent kids, because their brains just don't understand the concept. But that's the design, and that's the system. The WHO declassified gender dysphoria as a mental health disorder in 2019 for no reason whatsoever. And ask yourself, has the trans movement become more of a public issue in 2024, 5 years later? Yes, it's risen from affecting 0.0004% of the population to, as a minimum, 1%, which is scientifically impossible. Completely scientifically impossible. The only thing is it's been installed on them. And teaching CRT, racism, teaching who to hate, how to hate, why to hate them, and when to hate them most. That's what CRT does. That's also what DEI does. That's what DEI is there to find racism and hatred and bigotry. And if they can't find it, they have to manufacture it. Otherwise, they have no job. If an organisation has nobody in it that's racist, the DEI officer has no business, nothing to do. And here's the thing about racism: it's the biggest dividing issue in the Western world. But honestly, it's skin pigmentation. Your ancestors, where they settled in relation to the equator after all of us left Africa, having nearly killed off the entire population from warring tribes who were bigoted towards each other. And, they attacked each other and killed each other. We almost killed each other off through fear of the unknown and bigotry. Now, racism and any type of alienation and harassment or negative, any type of personal harassment is a racist thing, and it's also called bigotry. Any type of person who thinks lowly of somebody because of who they are as a person, without having met them and known their character, is a bigot. And you will find a bigot in every single country, in every single town, in every single village on earth. But you will not find that the majority of people in 2024 hold bigoted views. You just won't find that. Racism is an internally held belief. Nothing can be racist except a single person, or you can even say like a KKK, a group of people. You can say Iran, yes, because they've made it clear they want to end Western civilization. That makes them racist. The KKK, although they don't seem to ever appear anymore, but if they did, you could say, well, anyone who's a member of the KKK is racist because that's their mission statement. But you can't call any third party racist. You can't call an institution racist, and you can't call inanimate objects racist because it has to be an internally held belief. And if you say that this is racist and this is offensive to people of this tribe or this group, then you have to have interviewed everyone in that group to make that claim. Otherwise, you can just say, I think this might be offensive to that group. That's the best you can do. You cannot say that it is, and you cannot describe Western civilization as racist, because Western civilization does not have a belief system. For something to be racist, it has to have a belief system, which means it has to be a human being, or on rare occasions, a group of human beings. And that's actually becoming more on the far left than the far right. Ask yourself, how many far right protests have you heard about in the Western world recently in the last year and a half compared to far left protests, which go on apparently every single day in New York, but going on constantly since October the 7th, when suddenly all of the middle class white people in Western society became anti-Semitic. Do you think that was really their nature? Do you think that hate was the nature of the children? No, it was installed in them. Marxism was taught to them. The view of looking at history through the lens of the oppressed and the oppressor. Marxism and the ideology. It's very easy to explain if you say wokeism is Marxism exactly. Although the difference is Marxism was about class and wokeism has made it about identity, race, gender, sex, equality, whatever. Everyone has equal rights. Everyone in the Western world can achieve what they want. People fought hard for their equal rights, which is why I'm so pissed off with the young transmania group, because they've made people who fought hard for those rights, who were only choosing between male and female sex, and in 85% of the time, with therapy and understanding of the procedure, chose to stay in the same sex and enter same-sex relationships almost exclusively. So they were gay. Again, I don't see homophobia around anymore. I really don't. I mean, I don't have anyone I know who's homophobic. This Christmas, I've got my gay godfather and his boyfriend, who's a bit younger than him, but now his boyfriend's just a bit older than me, so it's all cool. And I was privileged to go to a gay wedding. The whole idea that people are racist, homophobic, and bigoted is really unfair to every single person. It's almost leveled out. There's very few people who get it leveled at them for the right reasons. And honestly, just think about the individual human brain. Its thoughts are run by every experience that you've had. So every thought you've had is run by every experience you ever had. It's completely distorted. I've done another piece on the subconscious brain and it explains that. It's completely distorted. So no groups think the same. And DEI is all about leveling the playing field so that everybody succeeds. There's a scene from Bruce Almighty when he takes over the role of God, where he grants all prayers, and 2.9 million people win the lottery, and it's only worth a few dollars because that many people won. It's that kind of idea. It's a fantasy land. There are only two genders and two sexes, with intersex as an actual condition that affects a rare amount of people, and that's fair. But in terms of the rest of it, it's all nonsense. It's all made up, and there's no real science behind any of it, except the science that shows it's harmful and it can cause cancer and 3 other fatal diseases, and that the suicidality rate of trans affected young people is 2 years after surgery, not before. The doctors say differently, and they lie to the parents deliberately about that. You can check this all out through the Hass report that was done in the UK and the WPATH files that were leaked by Michael Schellenberger on his environmentalsuccess.org. The link is in my profile. So check that out and have a look. But all of this does just simply show mass brainwashing. If there's no explanation for it, if it never occurred in history before, we've never seen a litany of suicides that would suggest it has, then it is brainwashing. And people who have caught the woke mind virus, which is a term that was phrased about 2 years ago, and it is very applicable, because unfortunately with the woke mind virus has made personality disorders contagious. And it really is a travesty of government and education that's been allowed to propagate, and it hasn't been very well monitored. So people like the older generations of Gen Z are coming out, going to the workplace and looking ridiculous and not having a work ethic and, having mental health days. And, the idea that when Donald Trump won the election, people made safe spaces and Legos and pillows and things. I mean, grow up. You're adult human beings. And, this used to be called codependency, but it's so far from reality than codependency was. But, the only thing that's holding you back from anything you want to do is internally your own belief system. I promise you, you're all capable of everything you ever want to do. There are, obviously, if you set ridiculously high ambitions, not everyone's possible of being a president of the United States. Not everyone can be Elon Musk, but everyone can be the best possible version of themselves with the skills that they were given when they were born. If they choose to activate them and learn with them and keep learning as they get older, that would be my recipe for success. It's constant learning. You never stop. It's a good skill to pick up. But regardless, the people who talk about white privilege are some of the most white privileged people on earth. What's that all about? My backstory is pretty colourful, but I was kidnapped and tortured in a third world country. I'm not a soldier, and I'm not saying that. I was just volunteering. I got into the wrong place at the wrong time. And some bad stuff happened to me because of my skin colour. And my life hasn't worked out as an Isle of Light, and there's no point of it where you can say he was privileged because of his skin colour. Didn't happen. Just didn't happen for me. Now, was there a time when being white was much better for people? Of course, yes. It's called history. And that's the problem, is people have been taught to look at history and try and dismantle it. But trying to dismantle the past is the most fool's errand, and any reasonable therapist will immediately tell you that. You need to make peace with the past in order to move forward with your own life. That's a kind of mandate for therapy. You cannot do that without that mandate. So this is what has caused this disruption in the education of Gen Z, and they're the first generation ever to be less literate, less numerically acute, and less scientifically acute than any generation before them, and that is sad, but there is hope for the generation underneath them who are rising up through that academic rank. And it would be easy to say that it's a conflict and, certain people feel a certain way, but let's look at this. The Democrat Party of America painted Donald Trump falsely using lies that have been debunked and even been debunked on the news stations that they were then propagating them again on, about him being the Fine People hoax, the Russian dossier hoax, the Bleach hoax, the Project 25 hoax, everything was sound bites of Donald Trump talking about something completely different and the bloodbath thing. And he was talking about an economic, a mechanical bloodbath for the auto industry. That's exactly what he was saying, but they just take one word or one top part of a sentence and twisted it all. And they really have convinced too many Americans that the world is about to end now that Donald Trump's become president, even though he was a very successful president beforehand and probably should have won in 2020. There's a lot of evidence to show that now. So that's all division and hatred, and everybody's marching and protesting, and they don't know what they're protesting, and what they're protesting is themselves. It's sad. What they're protesting is themselves. They say they hate America. They say they hate England. They say they hate Europe. And there are some bad actors. There are some Islamists paid to agitate these protesters to do certain things. And they need to be brought in, and the Islamists need to be deported. I define an Islamist as a radical Islamic. So somebody who believes that, conversion can mean death. So, all people need to be converted or killed. That's that kind of thing. Normal Muslims believe we'd like to convert all people to our religion. Very different. But we have division, huge amounts, and it is being funded by our enemies. Our enemies are paying for our own internal division. And they're succeeding, and they're laughing at the ease of their success because they've lost nothing but some money, and they've had great success. If you look at the Western culture now, it's at its most divided since we left Africa, where there was roughly 13,000 of human beings left in the world because we'd almost killed each other because of black on black. Everyone had the same skin colour, but tribalism and the fear of the unknown. Now we don't have the excuse of the fear of the unknown. As I said, your skin colour is only about the pigmentation of your skin from your ancestry is in their distance from migration to the equator, and there's nothing more to it than that. And Martin Luther King had the exact right message, and so did Nelson Mandela, which is judge someone by their actual character and not their skin colour, because it doesn't matter. And the fact is, it doesn't matter to almost everybody. I mean, there's so little real racism in the world, but there's so much loud, unreal, surreal racism in the world, and it needs to stop. We don't need to be at our throats. Donald Trump is probably going to do a very good job from a domestic point of view for the US citizens and from an international point of view in terms of making peace. There's already signs of that. Qatar have kicked out the terrorists. They don't want them anymore because everyone is worried. All of our enemies are now worried because Donald Trump is back in. So it's a good thing because we don't want to be on the brink of a third world war that could turn nuclear. We don't want that. Nothing in us wants that. So all of this division has been stoked and funded by our enemies. And the enemies who have declared themselves enemies to our way of life. And that's the Western democratic way of life. And it may not be perfect, and God knows it can be corrupt, but it's not definitely a dictatorship, and you still have a voice and you still have a say, as was proven in the monumental landslide for Donald Trump. So I'll leave it there, but think about what I've said, that the division that we have is all in our heads, and as soon as we can get our heads straight, the division can end. But until then, the tap's still on, and there's no point in mopping until you can turn the tap off. So I'll leave it there. Thanks for listening. It's always a pleasure doing these longer form chats. I hope you got something out of it. And you be lucky, I'll be good. I'll speak to you soon.